Yo, what is up everybody? It's Jay the Great here and welcome back to another rant video here today. You guys got the last rant video to 30 plus likes, which again is always greatly appreciated, and also requested that I do a Shisui rant, and as you can tell by today's title, that is what we're going to do here today. So if you would like me to continue making these, and it seems you guys want me to, get this video to 35 plus likes and I'll continue, and of course, make sure to leave down below in the comments who you want me to rant on next, or what you want me to rant on next. It could be a topic, character, etc. So make sure to hit that like goal and to let me know in the comments what you want me to, or who you want me to discuss about next. Now, Shisui is a character that, although has few moments empirically and narratively at all when analyzing the entire narrative, is still a character, regardless of that is highly revered in the Naruto fandom, and I would even argue is one of the most revered characters in the entire Naruto fandom as well. Right, he is famous for his teleportation abilities, his speed, and of course his famous Kotomatsukami genjutsu. So in today's video, I'll be discussing several aspects concerning Shisui's scaling, ending this video, just like the previous ones, with a general final conclusion on where he places in the Naruto power hierarchy, if you will. So the first aspect I want to discuss is the context surrounding his death. Now, first off, to preface the scaling and discussion of this specific aspect, I must address the very fact that there are several continuities and how his eye was removed from his very being, right? So there is the video game continuity, right? There is the novel continuity, and then there is the anime/manga continuity. Now, for the sake of this video, I'm going to be only discussing the anime/manga continuity. And for those that say, well, the anime isn't canon, I'm simply going to counter that by saying the anime, excluding filler of course, for the most part is simply just a further illustration of the manga itself. Now, are there discontinuities even within the manga in comparison to the anime? Yes. However, I don't think those handful of inconsistencies within the anime are enough to negate the very fact that the anime overall, excluding filler, again, is simply just a further illustration of the manga, where there is more detail and more narrative being told, since it's a motion picture, while conversely the manga is simply just panel by panel that can't display motion picture, right? So again, I'm going to be sticking to the anime/manga continuity when discussing the context of Shisui's death. Now, in the manga specifically, again, the altercation with Danzo was never shown, hence rationally, again, it is most likely that he experienced the events that he experienced in the anime, as that is nearly a play-by-play portrayal of the manga for the most part, as I just described. Now, what also increases the probability of this being the case is in the manga, Shisui only states that Danzo stole his eye, by the way, to Itachi prior to his suicide, not specifying the Aburame clan in that conversation. Alright, so hence, again, I will be utilizing this continuity as it is the main one, and that's where we'll go from here. So, getting to the actual discussion now. In the altercation between Danzo and Shisui, Danzo attempts to blitz Shisui and fails to with his first attack, resulting in Shisui placing him in a genjutsu, right, as we all know in the anime. However, Danzo utilized Izanagi and then proceeded to blitz Shisui again, and this time successfully stealing his eye in the process as a byproduct, right? Now, while you can argue that Shisui was caught off guard due to him most likely not having knowledge of the Izanagi, and or of Danzo specifically having the Izanagi, it is still most likely the case that Shisui was still physically unable to react to the attack at hand. Now, to me, this indicates an arbitrary level of relativity as far as combat speed is concerned between Shisui and Danzo, as even the Sharingan, which was active during the second blitz of Danzo, was not enough to react to Danzo's admittedly quick attack. However, admittedly, I would still deduce Shisui is overall faster, despite the arbitrary relativity in speed. However, as he was able to actually counter the first attack quite easily and put Danzo in a genjutsu, as we all know, which he had to use Izanagi to get out of and blitz him the second time successfully. So statistically, from a mathematical standpoint, if we're trying to put numerical values as far as odds are concerned, I would say Danzo more than likely would win more times than not because of the Izanagi, and again, because of the very indication that Shisui in character lacks killer intent against even more so rogue shinobi from Konoha like Danzo, right? Because Danzo, as we all know, was always undermining the authority of Hiruzen, the third Hokage, and would at times go behind his back to take matters into his own hands, such as in this specific case here. Now again, regardless of the statistical percentage of who would win against the other more times than not, it is very clear and very safe to deduce that there is an arbitrary level of relativity as far as speed is concerned between Shisui and Danzo, and also a very clear indication due to Shisui's hesitation to kill someone like Danzo. If there were a battle where Danzo was trying to eliminate Shisui, he more than likely would do so, because again, Shisui lacks killer intent, and Danzo really has nothing hampering him as far as his ambition and conviction to achieve his goals, being a totalitarian figure in the Konoha governmental bureaucracy, right? So to really make this point hit home, compare Shisui's performance to 5 Kage Summit Sasuke's performance, right? An individual that has a blatantly better performance than Shisui does against Danzo, right? There are some parallels in this battle. One being, neither one came into the fight knowing of Izanagi. But what was the difference? Shisui was only able to counter Danzo the first time. Sasuke essentially killed Danzo multiple times until he ran out of actual Sharingans to continue to use the Izanagi. What that indicates is a sort of power hierarchy amongst these characters, right? Sasuke would be above both, as he has the better performance against a similar character. And you could even argue, knowing Danzo and his convictions, he most likely continued to experiment on himself and modify himself, as well as train, I'm sure, to hone his skills to achieve his goals. Hence, it's even likely that Sasuke did better against a stronger Danzo than Shisui did against a younger and likely less capable Danzo, right? So that kind of sets up this hierarchical tree, if you will, amongst these three individuals, right? So all these sort of empirical pieces of evidence indicates to me that Shisui Uchiha is relative in speed to Danzo, but arbitrarily superior, but would lose more than likely in a battle to the death in character, keyword, because of his hesitation to kill who he considers his fellow brethren, which don't just include Uchiha, as we all know. He's very loyal to Konoha, very similar to Itachi Uchiha. So that's the analysis / dissection of the contextual parameters surrounding Shisui's defeat by Danzo and his death, of course. So now we move on to the next aspect, which I think is a very interesting discussion, which is still had in today's Naruto fandom, that being Shisui versus Itachi comparisons, right? Now, before I discuss this aspect, keep in mind again that I am only analyzing the main continuity, as using the game continuity specifically, or even the novel, would change my conclusions to this aspect significantly. If I were to use the games, for example, there's actually displays of Shisui and Itachi combating each other, and Shisui says, "Oh, I just took the winning record against you," implying relativity. But again, I'm not using the continuity. I'm not using that continuity. I'll be utilizing the main continuity, where that's never explored, and we have different events to come to different conclusions, as I will now get into. So, like I previously discussed, we have the Danzo altercation with Shisui, which gives us at least somewhat of an idea of where Shisui scales, right? With Itachi, however, with the younger Itachi, we more so have statements and dialogue to scale him in comparison to Shisui, again, prior to the Uchiha massacre and his initiation into the Akatsuki. Would I would argue he became more skillful and more powerful. So I'm not discussing that Itachi. I'm more so discussing Itachi around that time period, right? From Shisui's death to the Uchiha massacre, around that time period, mostly. So a very interesting note that I was able to deduce from analyzing the canonical literature of Itachi during his time prior to the Uchiha massacre was from when the Uchiha police force go to question Itachi, right? Because from that discussion that they have with him, it's very easily implicative that they're suspicious of Itachi killing Shisui, and that the Shisui suicide story is simply a mirage to hide that apparent crime. So them questioning Itachi allows us to deduce the high probability that not only do they think he killed Shisui, right, but that he has the ability and is high enough of a caliber of combatant to kill Shisui. And keep in mind, additionally, they even state that Shisui is one of the most talented in the clan and that he wouldn't give up his life so easily, which further implies, again, the high probability that they deem Itachi a caliber of opponent that can in fact kill Shisui, right? Now again, because they stated Shisui is one of the most talented and they're suspicious of Itachi killing Shisui, they deem Itachi as either a relative talent or even a superior talent to Shisui, and that's indicative due to the very fact they believe Itachi killed Shisui, right? So not only can we deduce they think Itachi killed him, but we can also deduce they believe he has the ability to do so, right? Because we could say, to further reinforce our proposition, that a condition that is necessary, a prerequisite that is necessary for you to kill someone is, in more cases than not, the ability to kill someone, right? Unless it's an outlier case where you off guard somebody or you kill someone in their sleep or something like that, which is very, very rare in the Naruto verse, I might add. Some examples are Tobirama versus Kin, very good sensory ninja. Kakuzu against Naruto, he literally turned his head but couldn't react to Rasen Shuriken. Kaguya getting punched by Sakura, etc. There's a plethora of examples to indicate that being actually off-guarded is very unlikely. Hence, it's very unlikely that the police force of the Uchiha clan believed Itachi simply off-guarded the guy or killed him not at his best, right? So because of that, again, a prerequisite to kill someone in the Naruto verse is usually, and more times than not, the ability to kill that such said someone, right? In this case, because they believe Itachi killed Shisui, they deem him as a caliber of opponent that has the ability to kill Shisui. Now that's a very key point. What does that indicate further? That Itachi more than likely was superior to Shisui in the eyes of the Uchiha. And of course, they've seen both these guys grow from their infancy and their youth, implying that it's more than likely the case that Itachi is superior to Shisui. Is basically the point I'm trying to deduce at this point in time, at least with this specific iteration of Itachi. This specific iteration of Itachi is more than likely superior to Shisui because of the analysis of the contextual parameters of that discussion with the police force and the deductions I was able to construct due to the dialogue that was had and due to the deductions the police force made of Itachi, right? So that's actually a very important note that I deduced looking at the narrative again when preparing for this analysis, right? So continuing on though, to further reinforce my premise that Itachi is most likely superior around this point in time is his interaction with Danzo in comparison to Shishui's, right? As we all know, Shisui, like I already illustrated, had his eye robbed by Danzo, right? Now, what we can deduce from that is that not only does Danzo have the ability to do this, right, in the main manga continuity / anime continuity, he has the confidence in doing so, right? And because he has the confidence, the chances of him being successful are most likely higher because in his own mind, he's deducing, I could do this to Shisui. But, as we all know, after the Uchiha massacre, Itachi would threaten Danzo, and he even had, I believe, some Anbu individuals with him as well, and tell him, if you mess with Sasuke, you will pay the price. I will expose underground secrets of Konoha to enemy nations. So do not attempt to test my patience, right? And what did Danzo do? He simply sat there and accepted the threat. He didn't try to attack Itachi, even with other Anbu, I believe, around him at that point in time that would theoretically aid him in that attempt. He didn't even try to threaten or attack Itachi because, more than likely, he deduced in his own mind, Itachi is too powerful to combat, right? So that just further reinforces the premise I've been creating with the Itachi versus Shisui comparisons, that Itachi is more than likely superior to Shisui at this point in time, right? Now I can go a step further, but to be fair, this is a little bit later in the story, with Itachi's altercation with Orochimaru, right? This was shortly after his initiation within the Akatsuki, right? This is a little bit later on after the Uchiha massacre and things like that, so you could argue he got stronger, that's fine, but it wasn't too long after, it wasn't years later or anything of that matter, and he fodderized Orochimaru so badly, in fact, that Orochimaru never dared even challenge him again, right? So put that into perspective, and Orochimaru, as we know, was able to go toe-to-toe with Hiruzen later on in the narrative, during the Konoha Crush arc, and as we know, Hiruzen is above Danzo, as Danzo has to undermine his authority and go behind his back because he knows he's inferior, and the very fact that he was chosen over Danzo as the Hokage by Tobirama prior to his death, right? So all these empirical pieces of evidence reinforce the high likelihood that Itachi, during this point in time, was in fact superior to Shisui Uchiha. Not to quickly recap all that and put it all together in a more short and concise form, and to really encapsulate what I said, the police force suspicion reinforces the fact that he most likely has the ability to kill Shisui. The Danzo altercation, when comparing his to Shishui's, indicates Danzo deems himself as capable of attacking Shisui, but not of attacking Itachi. And the Orochimaru altercation, which admittedly is a weaker piece of evidence due to the argument that can be created that he's stronger in comparison to the Uchiha massacre point in history, which is fine. However, I do still deem it as an empirical piece of evidence to suggest that he is blatantly above Sannin significantly, while conversely, Shisui, when he battled Danzo, struggled with him, and as we know, Danzo's inferior to Hiruzen, and Orochimaru is relative to him, at least in the Konoha Crush arc. Right, so all those empirical pieces of evidence allow me to conclude, again, the high likelihood that Itachi is superior to Shisui, even at this point in time. So that's that aspect. I thought it was a very interesting aspect that many people don't dive deeply into, and again, those are the pieces of evidence I have provided to substantiate my claim on that. Now, the next aspect I would like to discuss is the Kotomatsukami, right? Does Shisui have a different variation of the Kodo within each eye, right? So this aspect has been discussed by some of the top creators, such as Soikage, shout out to him. So this aspect is certainly interesting, as the wonder behind the difference in the Kodo ability between each eye has again been something that has been discussed in the Naruto fandom for quite some time, right? So what I did is I analyzed the canonical literature to come to the best conclusion possible, right? So my theory is that it appears that each eye is in fact a variation of the Kotomatsukami. The one that Danzo seems to wield, specifically during the Five Kage Summit, seems to be a less binding variation of it, as Mifune during the Five Kage Summit was broken from it after right, the right-hand man of the Mizukage, utilized his Byakugan to decipher Genjutsu being cast upon Mifune by Danzo. Additionally, I would note, it is possible that the cool-off period for this variation isn't 10 years either. However, you could deduce that is only the case for Danzo specifically, as he has Hashirama cells, resulting in him having more chakra than the typical Uchiha like Shisui. So you could argue for either way. I wouldn't blame you. You could argue that Shisui himself had a less binding variation of the Kodo in one eye, right? And the cool-off period was less. Or you can come to the conclusion that Danzo had a less binding variation, but only he had a quicker cool-off period due to having Hashirama cells. There's no real way to really deduce whether it's one way or the other, and I don't blame you for deducing one way or the other. It's truly inconclusive. From a objective standpoint, and almost from a purely rational standpoint, there really is no logical strategy I could implement or utilize to come to the conclusion for one way or the other. It's almost impossible. You have to blatantly just speculate. There's no way to avoid that, admittedly. Now, the right eye, which is utilized upon Itachi during the Fourth Great Ninja War, is certainly more binding in power in comparison, observably, as it was even strong enough to unbind Itachi from the bind of Kabuto's iteration of the reanimation jutsu, which is clearly immense, as evident by the army he had at his disposal, and from the statements he made about the jutsu, where it was nearly unbeatable and unbreakable, right? So, the very observable feats that Kabuto was able to achieve with this reinforces the very binding power of his variation of the reanimation jutsu, and only one man was really able to break it, and that was Madara Uchiha, right? So that allows you to deduce the extreme binding power of this eye, right, and this variation of the Kotomatsukami, respectively, is immense and very, very high. Now, this one blatantly has a 10-year cool-off period, and we can say that safely because Itachi states that himself after he casts the Kotomatsukami upon himself, right, during the Fourth Great Ninja War. So that's the powerful version of the Kotomatsukami. So again, my theory is that each eye has a variation of the Kodo, right? The right eye has the blatant manipulation of will Kodo, which you cannot break from, but has a 10-year cool-off period, and the other eye has what seems to be a less binding variation of the Kodo, and possibly has a less lengthy cool-off period in comparison, unless you argue that it's only specific to Danzo because of the fact that he contains Hashirama cells in his chakra network and in his very being due to experimentation, right? Now, if I had to speculate and make my deduction, due to the binding power, I would deduce that Shisui as well had a less lengthy cool-off period with that variation of the Kodo, because the binding power, right, and the blatant immense power that the right eye has seems to be, if not the only reason, at the bare minimum, one of the main reasons why the cool-off period for Kodo is so long, right? The ability to literally manipulate another man's will seems like a very chakra-consuming task for your chakra network. It makes sense why the cool-off period is 10 years. While conversely, the other one, the binding power doesn't seem to compare even remotely, as you simply need to be aware of the fact that you're in it and you can break out of it, right? So it seems, if I had to choose a side to this theory when it comes to that specific aspect, I would deduce Shisui was able to utilize that one and not have to deal with the 10-year cool-off period if I really had to decide. So that's my analysis of the Kodo and the variations of Kotomatsukami respectively in each eye, and the very parameters that come with each. All right, that's my theory there. Now, to conclude on Shisui's scaling, I want to discuss his lore and his overall scaling in the Naruto verse and kind of place him in the power hierarchy, if you will, within the Naruto verse. So where does Shisui scale, you might ask? Well, based off the empirical evidence I've presented, he is at best low Kage level, based on his lore and relativity to Danzo, who was a rival to Hiruzen himself, seemingly ever since their youth. Right, I would deduce he's low Kage level. That's not to be disrespected, nor is a statement in an attempt to downplay Shisui. That is very high scaling for the vast majority. Now, despite the apparent negative stigma Shisui receives for what people consider an anti-feat with the Danzo altercation, with killer intent, I will admit, he is certainly low Kage level, and I would see him defeating some fairly notable shinobi such as Hidan, Kakuzu, Danzo, Mei, possibly characters that scale as high as Deidara. However, you would almost have to purely speculate to make a case for someone of that caliber, to be fair, because, again, Shisui doesn't have much empirical evidence, despite what I've basically discussed in this video, right? So, with killer intent, I do see Shisui defeating Danzo and a lot of individuals in the Naruto verse. He's not weak by any means, and I will admit this as well. If I had to deduce the trajectory of Shisui Uchiha, if he were to stay alive, he'd be one of the strongest Uchiha of all time. He would probably be only second to Itachi, excluding Sasuke and Madara, of course. He'd probably be the top 4 strongest Uchiha in the world. Also Obito as well, I almost forgot him. He would be up there as well with those guys. He'd be that powerful and that threatening to the vast majority of the Naruto verse. Right? But even in his young age, he was already extremely capable, already at a Kage level. A low Kage level, but still a Kage level, which is very, very impressive. So again, if he had the chance to reach his prime, I would legitimately see him reaching mid to possibly even high Kage level with the levels of potential he was already displaying, again, at a young age. I would even go a step further and conclude that he would be able to compete with the likes of possibly even Kisame, Sasori, and maybe even perhaps Pain if he was able to reach his prime. Right? Again, we'll never know that, but based on the trajectory of his development as a shinobi in his career, it seemed he would have reached that rare era in his career. I think it's a very safe deduction to make based off the lore, based off his talent from a young age, and based off even the reputation he built as a combatant amongst other nations from such a young age. So he definitely would have contended with those levels of individuals if he were given the chance to live his life into his prime years. So yeah, Shisui is not to be disrespected nor undermined, I must say. Now, to conclude this video wasn't to undermine Shisui. It was to give him his flowers, but to also be objective in the scaling as well. Because with Shisui, I see people on both sides of the sort of conclusion spectrum, right? On the extreme side, they're on the extreme sides of both. One side says Shisui is beyond Itachi and could have beaten Itachi, and he could have beaten Hiruzen. He was like the strongest guy in the entire leaf besides like Minato or something like that. That's like the extreme case of him. And then on the other extreme, we have people saying he's fodder. He's significantly below Danzo, and he's fodder Uchiha, and that he doesn't even deserve to have the reputation he has. I believe both extremes are arguments that are either not done in good faith or done due to either ignorance or bias towards the actual contextual parameters of Shisui's life and career. So that's my analysis of Shisui. I hope you folks enjoyed that scaling or rant. I really wanted to get in depth on this one, so this one's a longer one, just like the Jiraiya one. But let me know your thoughts, whether you agree, whether you disagree, your thoughts on all the aspects that were discussed. And again, make sure to get this video to 35 plus likes, and I'll continue to do more. If you guys want me to do a topic next, feel free. Like I said, try to keep it controversial to really stir up the Naruto fandom melting pot, if you will. I like to stir it up and get conversation brewing. You know, it does well for me, it does well for you guys, and it's just overall a good time. You know, these rants, this concept of ranting and scaling came out of nowhere, and you guys seem to enjoy it. I enjoy it personally as well, and it's good to see you guys, receiving it well. And as always, if you guys ask, y'all shall receive. So again, make sure to let me know what or who you want me to discuss about next in the next rant. But that's going to wrap it up, folks, and I'll catch you in the next one. Stay classy.